Hi, everybody. Welcome to the podcast. It may interest you to know. I'm Toni Ann Marcolini. And today we have a very special guest, Barry Livingston, a longtime actor, has been in the field for as long as I can certainly remember. And he's been involved in so many great projects. I'm really looking forward to digging into some of them today. So welcome, Barry.
Hey, thank you. Good to be here.
Well, I know everybody wants to know really about, my three sons, and I want to get there, but I don't want to start there because there's so many other things that you've been involved with that I think are sort of interesting and cool, and I was hoping to touch upon.
Great.
So, like early on in your career, before you kind of get I don't want to call it steady. That doesn't maybe sound right, but a steady work, on My Three Sons. You certainly did a bunch of different guest appearances on other TV shows. And even after, you certainly were involved and it involved with a lot of different, I mean, iconic people. I want to talk a little bit about your appearance on Here's Lucy,
Uh-huh.
right? So getting the opportunity to work with Lucille Ball, I mean,
Right.
wow. Can you tell us what that was like?
Well, she was an idol of mine as a kid. From I Love Lucy, which was I think the best of the three series that she did. It was Here's Lucy, The Lucy Show, and I Love Lucy. But I was already under contract to the people at My Three Sons playing the kid next door. So I was on her lot, the Desi Lou Studios. I used to see her all the time, my first encounter with Lucy was just riding my bike around the studio, and then one day, I saw her tearing by in her golf cart, going much faster than she should have. And she just went, "Hey, Barry!" And I thought, "Oh my God, I crashed my bike." That she knew my name, and that kind of stunned me because I'd been working pretty regularly. I was on the Ozzie and Harriet show and did 16 episodes of that and a few movies. So in retrospect, I kind of get she knew who I was, but at the moment that I heard my name falling out of her mouth, I was really shocked. But yeah, then and then she requested me to do a couple episodes, and I guess the most famous one was she gave me a mohawk. I was playing Gail Gordon was a regular on the Lucy show, and it was her boss, and I was his son, and she was trying to prove her frugality or whatever, and to giving self haircuts, and of course it went hysterically wrong, but that it was all good. It was a lot of fun.
Do you remember the first scene you did with her? Like I mean, you're young. I mean, you're a boy for all intent and purposes, right? And they say action, right? You're filming a scene with Lucille Ball. I mean, what did the magnitude of that hit you?
Well, dare I say it, I was already pretty experienced at that point. So, it was not like I just walked in off the street and suddenly was like staring at Lucille Ball. Like I say, I'd done a few movies, one with Debbie Reynolds called My Six Loves, and Jackie Gleason, and Errand Boy with Jerry Lewis, and a bunch of episodes on other shows. So, I mean, I was savvy and I was prepared. Nonetheless, it was Lucy, and and again, I got to see Lucy behind the scenes. Most people see the television persona of the zany, crazy. She was a tough lady. She was maybe one of the first certainly executives in television that really ran the ship, and was no wilting flower if things that she thought were being overlooked. She was very vocal, let's put it that way, about things. So I'd already had a week of working with her, and then when we shot our scene, it was very funny. She was great, and I was pretty good too.
Well, it's a perfect segue, but I want to talk about some of the things you just said. You did get an opportunity to work with Jerry Lewis and Jackie Gleason. So can we talk a little bit about them?
Sure. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I
Well,
mean,
Jerry
I mean,
Lewis was again another childhood idol at that point. This is early 60s, maybe 60, 61, and he shot a film with him called The Errand Boy. And I guess it's become kind of an iconic scene in that movie of the little kids who come into the studio commissary or the candy store, and make him go up and down a ladder, getting jelly beans, and it's a funny little sketch, and oddly, it goes on and on. I watched it not too long ago, and and everybody's now so concerned about pace and everything, but it was very like a very well laid out, structured comedic sketch. And it seemed like it went on for 10 minutes, but had very little to do with the plot, other than it was a funny little sketch that he put into it. And Jackie Gleason, I recall him just sort of being very jolly, I think inebriated, but he was a big presence. And again, I loved him from The Honeymooners, so both those jobs are great.
Were I'm curious, these three very funny actors, right? Lucille Ball, Jerry Lewis, and Jackie Gleason. They're known for their comedy. Were they funny off camera?
Um, no, they were very serious, actually. I mean,
That's interesting.
they were craftsmen, and they had a lot of weight on their shoulders to deliver a product to the studio that fulfilled everyone's expectations of being a big hit and make it funny, and they were funny guys. I don't recall them at all being like making jokes and making people laugh. I think they were very much focused on making, when they got in front of the camera, that was a different thing. But to work with these people, it's they were serious artists, and I mean, Gleason was a little less he was just there as an actor. So but Jerry Lewis was producing and writing and starring, and Lucy was doing the same. So they were much more focused on the work, I thought.
And you have an interaction with Paul Newman as well, don't you?
Yes, you're going way back. Okay.
That's a great story, though.
It was the first job I ever had, and I was cast as his son, as was my brother Stan, who became Chip also on My Three Sons. We were both cast on that, and I was wearing glasses. No, actually, I wasn't wearing glasses. The story, I wasn't wearing glasses, and when I was cast, and then in the middle of shooting, I was having some issues with focusing my eyes on a television, and the director was losing his mind because he thought I was looking somewhere around the set, but my eyes just started to cross, literally, like it was noticeable when I was working. And he was getting more and more upset. And Paul Newman, who was in the scene with us, he played our dad, and he's supposed to be coming home from work. And Stan and I were sitting on a sofa, and we're supposed to ignore him. We're supposed to just stare at the TV, and that's what the director wanted us to do, but it looked like I wasn't. And he was getting more and more upset with me. And Paul just kind of intervened and said, oh, come on, he's a little kid. I was 5 years old, I think. And he says, I'm going to get me a puppet. We got the establishing shot. You see me coming through the door and saying hi to the boys, and they ignore me. And now, you go to the close-up of the kids. So yeah, he got inside of one of those old television boxes, from the 50s that as big as a refrigerator. And, somebody gave him a puppet, and he started waving at me, thinking, they keep my attention where it's supposed to be on the screen or on the TV. But even that didn't work, And then they realized I had a problem with my eyes, and they took me to a hospital directly to this from
Oh, wow.
from the set, thinking maybe I was having a seizure or something. Came back a day or so later with glasses because they said this kid needs glasses. He's got an astigmatism. And so the producers fired me pretty much on the spot. They just said, well, that's not how we cast this role. And we don't think it fits the character of, Paul Newman's son and all that. So I was escorted to a vehicle that sped me off the lot pronto. And so that was my welcome to show business story.
Wow. Yeah. You were on the Dick Van Dyke Show too.
Yeah. Yeah.
What was that like? I mean, Dick Van Dyke, Mary Tyler Moore, again.
Uh, yeah, funny, but again, he's a serious guy. He could be funny on screen, but he was just doing his thing. He was, I mean, we were the ones that actually sort of got in trouble with me and his son, Richie, and another kid. And he brings us in, Richie does, to see his dad sleeping in these very funny leopard skin pajamas or something. Anyway, we started laughing. We weren't supposed to laugh. We were supposed to, covers come down and Dick is laying there asleep in these wild pajamas, and we were just supposed to go, oh, wow. But instead, we started laughing, which giggles. And the director, Carl Reiner, came out and kind of gave us a mild tongue lashing and told us to be, you know, get professional, And so we eventually got it. But Dick was very patient. He was really sweet.
Mary Tyler Moore as well. I assume that you got to
I
meet her.
met her, didn't work with her though, but yeah, just Dick.
What was that set like? I mean,
Again, when you're a kid, you're in school most of the time. They bring you out, for the rehearsal. They bring you out to shoot it. You don't hang out on a set much when you're a minor. You're usually in studio school, and so yeah, it seemed all right. I don't know.
I mean, that's a huge opportunity, right? When you're that age, and you are literally on a show that people are watching in their homes every night. I mean,
Mhm.
did the power of that resonate with you at that age?
Not really. I mean, by that point, it was work, and it was fun, and of course, it elevated your status as among your friends and your family. We're all kind of stunned that suddenly this weird little child in the family is on television, and that was a big thing back in the 60s. A big thing now, but I guess when 25, 30 million people would tune in to watch a show, which that was kind of normal back in that day of a hit series. It was a pretty big deal, and you couldn't help but notice it was that it was kind of a nice little perk. But yeah, I didn't think too much about it really.
You got an opportunity to work with Elvis too.
No, I didn't work with Elvis. I was shooting My Six Loves with Debbie Reynolds on at the Paramount lot, and I came out. Again, I had spare time. You do your 3 hours of school, and then you got a lot of time and a lot of energy as a kid. And I had my bike, I guess, then, and I was just riding around, and I came across a limousine that was idling outside of a soundstage, and the door was open, and I never had seen anything quite that luxurious. It was beautiful interior, all white leather and white furry rock carpeting, gold trim cabinetry, and a TV. That blew me away. In 61, 62, a portable TV in a car was pretty unique. And then he came out and saw me peeking into the car, and then he again, it's only dawned on me recently. I don't know why, because he invited me to go for a ride around the lot. His car had just been customized by Chuck Barris, his limo. And you tell people that, and I just kind of thought, wow, this sounds kind of pervy. This old guy, older guy, inviting a little kid to go. But I'm sure he recognized me from the Ozzie and Harriet show, and I don't know why that's just never kicked in till recently. But because he knew Rick, and I think he was a big fan of the Ozzie and Harriet show, so he, obviously knew I was an actor. He wasn't just some kid wandering around the studio, and yeah, so we just had like a little 5-10 minute spin around the studio lot, and he tested all the buttons and turned on the TV, and we watched Popeye, and came back to where we started, and he went his way and I went mine.
How many people can say they watch Popeye with Elvis? I
Not
mean,
many. Yeah, I guess not many.
not many. And you were in that movie with Debbie Reynolds,
Right.
and also, iconic by way of actors.
Yeah,
Remember
no.
anything particular? Anything strike you about that opportunity to work?
Well, the other act, Cliff Robertson, David Jansen was in it, Eileen Heckert. Oh
All
God,
major, all
every,
major people.
everybody, John MacGyver, Alice Ghostly, the list, Percy Kilbride. I mean, it just went on and on and on. These are old character actors that were very well known. But Debbie was very sweet. She really liked me. My part kept getting expanded. She came up to my mother. I was told this after the fact. And she said to my mom, she said, Barry's very good. And she goes, he's got what they call a natural comedic timing. And, coming from her, who was, a very talented, big, huge star. She might have been the biggest star in Hollywood at that point. It was a sweet compliment. And she, Yeah, she was very kind to me, and again, I think I was Sherman was my name, but my gag that they it wasn't in the script. They kept coming up with bits for me, and I was, we were supposed to be runaways, a bunch of orphans that kind of, she took into her house, but she was a big Broadway star. And anyway, but I'd never seen indoor plumbing before. That was the gag. So, you'd hear a toilet flush, and I would come marching out of the bathroom, kind of grinning, because like I was so impressed with indoor plumbing. Uh, but yeah, that was a really good experience. And Debbie was fantastic.
Eventually, you do wind up on, on My Three Sons, but your brother had been there first. Am I correct?
Yes, he was cast as Chip in the pilot was shot in '59. It finally aired in 1960. I came onto it in '63 or '4 as the friend next door. So he was already on it for a few years.
And eventually there's some level of shakeup, if you will. I think one of the brothers, they move away, and you kind of become the third son.
I was, conveniently kind of hanging out in the bullpen waiting. I had no idea. Maybe the studio knew about that and had me there as a backup. But Tim Considine, who I loved, who played the oldest son originally, Mike, decided he wanted to move on. He just wanted to do some directing and writing, and they weren't going to let him do that on Sons because we had a very unorthodox way of filming. So, he just said time to go, and his contract was up, and again, then they were like, well, you're going to be the new son. You're the adopted son, Ernie. But again, when I had to audition for that, when I was just going to be the kid next door to Chip's friend, I had to go in and audition for it, even though they knew me. I was, again, pretty well known as a child actor and hung out on the set a lot because my brother was there. So, they all knew me just personally. But I still had to go in and audition for the producers and, get their approval, and the rest is history.
Sure. When you say unorthodox way of filming, I think I read this. Didn't Fred McMurray have like every scene that was in the kitchen for the whole season shot in one block or something like that?
Sometimes they would do that, but you would work out of 4 or 5, 6 scripts a day and just shoot scenes that he was in, because, in a story, there's scenes without Fred, but every script had X amount of scenes with Fred in it. They would shoot those first all at once and get his close up and then move on, just in a mad rush to get everything with Fred done because he was only there for maybe a couple months in out of maybe a 7 or 8 month schedule. And then he'd come back he'd do that for about 8, 9 weeks. You'd just film exclusively Fred McMurray scenes, and then he would go away, and then we would continue filming all the other scenes that he wasn't in, if you would do a close up, they would sometimes just do a skipped close up that they shot maybe 2 months earlier, but they thought, let's do this close up now that'll match when they edit. They already had Fred's close up done months earlier, but now I'm going to do my matching close up, and it would be a script girl reading his lines off camera, not Fred. Normally actors read their lines off camera for the other actors. So, but then he would come back at the end for maybe about a 3 week period and just tie up loose ends, and that's when we would sometimes just be in the kitchen and just do one close up after another, sitting at the dining table, just getting matching shots and some stuff that with him. So yeah, you could eat lunch all day long or breakfast all day long sometimes.
Now, William Frawley is in the early years of the show, of course, from I Love Lucy,
Yeah,
Fred.
yeah.
And I read somewhere that there were, I want to say, pranks on Vivian Vance from I Love Lucy. Is that, you remember
Yeah,
that?
yeah, that was pretty. They were not fond of each other from I Love Lucy, and Bill would get Stan and I to collect all these old metal film cans, and and when when the whim hit him, and he probably had had a few drinks at lunch, we would get our stash of film cans, and the Lucy show was filming right next door to My Three Sons. We were both working at Desilu, and he'd hold up in the door, and they'd hear a rehearsal, and he'd hear Vivian's voice, somewhere off camera, on this big sound stage. But he'd listen to hear her voice, and then he'd go throw them, and then we'd like frisbee these big, metallic cans and it hit and it sounded like a bomb going off, and then we would run back to our sound stage and and hide out. And he thought that was very, very funny.
Were you guys ever discovered? Or
Not that I know of. I don't think so. We've confessed over the years that I don't know if the powers that be wondered what was going on, but it was Bill's little prank against Vivian.
so what was that set? What was the set of My Three Sons like for you as a young actor? Because I know a lot of different young actors start off, of course, in the age bracket that you were in, but things don't always turn out as well. But what was that set like? I mean, was there something different from like you think the sets that most child actors experience?
Well, we were not treated in any particularly royal way. We were all sort of, actors and working with a guy like Fred, who was already a bona fide, superstar, big movie star that, one of the first guys to come back and do TV on that. But it was very, he set the tone, he was a kind of a quiet, conservative, reserved guy. And there was not a lot of pranks, not a lot of, not a lot of discord. Everybody got along really well. And, the only one that really got away with with swearing a lot was Bill Frawley. But I think Fred had worked with Bill Frawley previously and loved him, and you just accepted him for who he was. And we thought he was hysterical when he let loose with a string of expletives. We thought that was the greatest. And but beyond Bill sort of being a little cantankerous and pushing the envelope, we all pretty much were doing our job, happy to be there. And again, it was a no drama set, really.
Do you have a favorite episode? And I'm sure you get this question a lot, but I'm just curious because you did so many episodes, both like you said, as the next door neighbor, and then you move into being the adopted third son. But do you have a particularly favorite episode?
Oh, I guess, the one with the lion, there was this silly, idea that Bryant Park, which is where we were supposed to be living, some zoo, I guess it was the circus had come to town and a lion got loose, and the lion, comes into well, finds its way to the Douglas household, and it's a funny little episode. And I mean, it was working with a real lion was kind of a
Oh,
fun experience. It was all drugged up. And yeah, that was unusual. And then we did one where I think Robbie started a bakery business, and we eventually have a big old-fashioned Mack Sennett style pie fight. So as a kid, that's just it's fun. Storylines were interchangeable practically. Robbie, gets a flat tire and misses a date, and Chip, he loses his phone book and can't call a girl. Who cares? But when a lion comes or you have an old-fashioned pie fight, those are the things you, as a kid, you kind of remember. Those are fun doing.
sure. And you've been in the acting world, for since childhood. I mean, is that the dream in your heart, so to speak? I mean, was there ever a time when you thought, hey, you know what? I'd like to be an architect. Was there ever any other dream that stuck with you?
Not really. I mean, no. I mean, no. I mean, as I grew older, and the show ended when I was about 18, and that's about the time you start really getting serious about what am I going to do with my life. And I was getting some feedback and encouragement from some people, some of the directors there, that they thought, hey, like Debbie Reynolds said, hey, the kid's got some pretty good comedy chops, and so yes, but it's an uncertain road, when you get off a series and you're a kid, and there's certainly all the pitfalls that occur when you're famous and then no longer famous. But that didn't bother. I was not comfortable terribly with being pointed out or fawned over, or I went to public school, so that was a challenge to grow up. When you're sort of famous and you're in the big house with all the other inmates. you're kind of, a target. But I took it serious when I got out of finishing My Three Sons. I said, I really do think that I might give this a try because I did enjoy it, but no guarantees. But the advice to me was get serious. If you're going to really do it, if you want to become a lifelong actor and make a living at it. A lot of people call themselves actors, but don't make a living at it. Go study. I went to New York. I did a work on Broadway and off Broadway, and did a lot of other projects after My Three Sons, another series for CBS called Sons and Daughters. And so, all those things were little steps fulfilling whatever my dream was, that, yeah, maybe I could do this for a career. And here I am some 50 years later, still doing it.
I'd like to talk about some of the guest spots you did on certain shows, because I think it must have been such an interesting opportunity to get to do some work on in some of these projects. So you get a chance to be on Two and a Half Men.
Yeah, I mean, immediately after the show, I did Streets of San Francisco and Ironsides and Lucas Tanner and a bunch of TV movies. That was right after. Fast forward another 40 years. Yeah, I did Two and a Half Men and Will and Grace and Hot in Cleveland, and
Grey's Anatomy.
West Wing. I mean, I've done a lot of stuff since then. And so yes, working on Two and a Half Men with Charlie was great. Actually, it was funny because he one day came up to me. Actually, no, that's not true. I was working with Emilio Estevez, Charlie's brother, on a show called The Guardian. And he came up and he said, "Oh, the old man says to say hi." And I thought, the old man says to say hi. And I had no idea what he's talking about. He goes, my dad. And I said, "Oh, okay, all right." And he said, "Yeah, one of his first jobs was Martin was on My Three Sons." And I was like, "Oh, really?" He was a friend of probably one of the older sons, so I didn't really have any scenes with him. But that was kind of funny. And then working with Charlie, I had a recurring role on anger management after he left Two and a Half Men. So that was, Charlie was great to me. He was really fun. He was good. I like Charlie a lot.
What now? I want to say it's after Two and a Half Men. You did a guest spot on Grey's Anatomy.
Yeah, not the biggest role I've ever done. Yeah, I mean, that was like one little chief of the hospital or something. I mean, of all the things I've done, I did do Grey's Anatomy. It's there. Hardly something I think is something no opinion one way or the other about it.
Oh yeah, and I was just gonna say, what was it like to be on the set of Grey's Anatomy, right? There's a lot of
Yeah, I wasn't there long enough to even get a sense of what it was. It was one scene and out. So yeah, it was a good job. I mean, it was a great show. It's still on, for God's sake. So whatever, 18, 20 years later or something. So yeah, I was happy to be there, happy to have the paycheck. It was but in terms of, wow, this is something that's going to really make my career. I didn't think so. I thought shows like Mad Men and was a better gig, and I had a recurring role on Big Love, which I think those were much more interesting, challenging parts. But again,
well, let's
if you
talk
like it,
about
you like
that.
it. That's okay.
Well, let's talk about Big Love, I guess, first, right? Because that show was I want to say slightly controversial,
Yeah, yeah.
right? So, what was it like? I mean, were you readily into the role, like accepting the role as soon as it was presented to you, or did you feel as if, um, you worried about any backlash? I mean, was that even in the back of your mind, or no?
Nah, no. I mean, I'm up for a challenge, and I'm up for some to be part of something that's challenging work. And Big Love was sort of groundbreaking, and it was about the Mormons and their culture, and the good and the bad of that. And I got to work with some great actors, Bill Paxton and Harry Dean Stanton. I played Harry Dean Stanton's lawyer because he was the head of the cult. I don't even know if they called it Mormons. Probably didn't. I forget. But it was based on Mormons. and but he was the head of, the church, and Harry is, was an iconic character actor, great actor, and we got on really well. He can be kind of a quiet, cantankerous guy, and but it's hard to tell when you come onto a set and you're there. And I did 3 episodes, but he we eventually got talking, and I said, I'm probably the one guy on this set here who's been in Screen Actors Guild longer than you. And he kind of like, what's that mean? Because he'd been around for a long time. And I said, I was on this show. I said, I don't know if you ever watched a show called My Three Sons. And he was like, oh, Fred McMurray? I was like, yeah. So anyway, it was an icebreaker, and it was, just an opportunity to be, on a show that was being highly regarded, and as was Mad Men, which was really shot that around the same time. So they were, both gigs are great.
What's your creative process like? I mean, because it dawns on me that you're talking about all these different shows. I mean, they all, you're getting a character. Sometimes if you're a guest, I would think you're getting a character for a shorter period of time, right? It's 3 episodes, 2 episodes, 4 episodes,
Mhm.
and some arc. Do you have a process by which you take that paper character and give it his, I don't know, his quirks, his nuances of who the
Mhm.
character is?
Well, again, I've studied. I have a little bit of craft that you bring your craft and you merge that with your imagination and your, hopefully, some innate uh, talent and observations that you acquire in life about people, and you try to. I mean, I can't say I'm a method actor. I mean, I've done some crazy things sometimes to try to find my way into another person that I'm going to play. What's their head? What are they thinking about? What's important to them? So, I go through that process, of looking at a role and trying to find any kind of connection in my life that I think uh, is similar to this person, and so that's very helpful. I mean, I guess they call that in the acting craft substitutions. Where you're substituting, but it can be crazy. It doesn't have to be spot on. Like, oh, this person, just stole a car. Well, you go, I don't know, I've never stole a car, but I remember, going in stealing some bubble gum sometime when I was a kid. Okay, hardly the same thing, but nonetheless, the intention and the intrigue and the whole thing around it, there's some connection there. That's probably a lousy comparison, but nonetheless, that's kind of what you try to do, is find things in your own life that connect you to what this character is experiencing.
Can we talk a little bit about Notorious?
Notorious Nick,
Yes, Notorious
and
Nick. Sorry.
yeah,
Can
VIP.
you
There's
tell
there's
like the
biggies,
plot of it?
Notorious. Huh? Say
Can
it
you
again.
talk a little about the plot of it?
Oh, well, I mean, you're referring to a movie that I did, came out in 2021. Great story about a guy who was Nick Newell, who was born with a congenital defect and only had one arm, really, and anyway, I played his high school wrestling coach, and just to be a wrestler at that with that kind of handicap is extremely challenging, and probably going to lead to not very many happy winning bouts. But nonetheless, he excelled. He really excelled as a wrestler in high school. And then he got it in his head that he really wanted to get into MMA, which is mixed martial arts, extremely challenging, brutal, physical, fights. And so again, he was at a real disadvantage, not being able to have both arms. He tried to pursue get into that world, and he was rejected completely because for all the obvious reasons. And eventually goes back to me as his wrestling high school coach, the only person that kind of understood his talent, and convinces me to become his trainer and try to work his way into the MMA world. Eventually, he gets some bouts and starts winning, and keeps winning, and eventually got a shot at the world championship. It's a great, inspiring, guy certainly had a dream and was not going to give it up, no matter how many obstacles or people told him to, get lost and, go do something else, go work at Burger King, for God's sake. This is a brutal sport. He actually changed the sport because he really brought wrestling. He brought his skills as a wrestler, because in MMA you can do any, you can kickbox, you can karate, you can box, you can do whatever. And so he had a real special skill as a wrestler. And so he actually, other fighters took note that you can actually get the upper hand in a fight if you can get him to the mat and wrestle the guy into submission and choke him out. And so rather than just a pummel the guy with your fists, which that happens too, and and he was good at that. But he excelled in his using what he had. He sort of took his handicap and used it to his advantage. So it's a great, find it on Amazon or DirecTV or Vudu or just Google it.
I definitely want to, see it. I read the synopsis for it, and I thought, this is going to be an inspirational movie. I mean, you kind of get the chills just reading the blurb
Yeah.
for it.
Yeah, I mean it fits into somewhat of a classic mold of Rocky, and the
Right.
the outsider, the guy who's told to get off get off that dream, move on, because it's nothing going to be nothing but a heartache for you. But it's, Cody Christian plays Nick Newell. Cody is on a show called All American now, and he's a great kid. Kevin Pollak is a great actor. He was in it, and Elizabeth Rome, myself. So yes, it was, a fantastic experience for me. It was a really kind of a nice, meaty role, and really had an opportunity to dig in and do some really interesting research, and it was just a lot of fun. And I think the results are really fantastic. I think people that I know have talked to, told me they've seen it, just love it. So
Well,
out
what I
there.
really like about it too is that, you know, you're highlighting, it's not just the story of, Rocky, who's like overcoming, uh, you know, I don't know what level of adversity do we say Rocky, he doesn't have anybody really in his corner so much in the beginning. So
Yeah,
sure, there's a certain underdog
right,
rising up the chain. But in here, I think I'm very attracted to the fact that he overcomes a disability,
right.
right? And
Yeah,
there's and
yeah,
that's an important voice,
yes.
to let out into the world. I
Absolutely.
think that's an inspirational story to tell.
Yeah, no, I think it does resonate in terms of people who can be relegated to the to the junk pile just because something occurred in their lives that was unfortunate circumstance beyond their control. And yeah, not like Rocky, who was just a big galoof who never really got his training and this and that. That's a problem too. But this is really, physical handicap is extremely debilitating just in terms of pursuing what you want to do in your life. And so yes, and that I was really attracted to in the story. And Nick is still out there. Nick Newell is still fighting. I don't know on what level. I know he lives in the East. He didn't come to the set, which is probably just as well. Uh, and the guy I play, Jeremy Libadzewski, is still out there somewhere, who was his wrestling coach and trainer. And yes, you are playing a real people, so that there's kind of a special obligation and responsibility to pulling that off too. And I'd heard that they liked it. That's good. But beyond that, I've never heard anything other than they approve, which is all you want, really.
You ultimately have written your memoir, right?
Hmm.
Not that long ago, I want to say it came out. Um, when did you know you wanted to do that?
I just had finished. Well, I've been fortunate to work with David Fincher, who's probably one of America's greatest living directors. Fight Club, Panic Room, the list goes on, some Benjamin Button. But I had done Zodiac for David with Robert Downey Jr. And I just had, after that, a couple years later, he asked me to be in Social Network. and Social Network was a, big hit. And I kind of, in my mind, I went, I've kind of hit that point where I think I've come full circle. Very, very popular and famous when I was a kid. And, my middle years, I was always working. But, the Social Network had become such a phenomenon. It was really well received, Oscar nominations, and was really kind of at the zeitgeist of Facebook's taking over the world. I thought, well, maybe it's time to sit down and reflect back on where I started from, my struggles to reestablish myself as an actor, an adult actor. Ups and downs, but I always continuously worked. But I thought this was kind of a nice peak. And that was the inspiration. That's what got me motivated to kind of go, and I should do this maybe for my family, for my kids, to sort of, recount not just my list of credits of my things that I've done, but the moments of my life that also seemed to push me forward or push me in a certain direction that made me who I am at that point and who I am today. So to combine those two things, professional and personal, just the markers that I could remember that sort of moved me ahead and kept me growing as a person. So that was the inspiration, and it came out pretty well. It's called The Importance of Being Ernie. Not The Importance of Being Earnest. That's Oscar Wilde. The Importance of Being Ernie.
Yeah, I actually just picked it up, so I'm looking forward to reading it.
Okay.
Because you can still get it, by the way.
Oh,
Everywhere. It's
absolutely.
definitely
Oh,
out there. You can still get it
yeah.
on Amazon and really
Amazon.
any place. I'm sure Barnes and Noble, any place that you buy your books, you can still get
Right.
it.
Yeah.
But I think personally, it would be difficult, right, to sit down and have to look at what is the collection of your life experiences and to select the most pivotal moments, right,
Yeah.
to include, because you mean you're not writing the encyclopedia, right? You can't just
Right.
that I think does it a disservice too. If you try to put everything in,
Yeah.
it just does
Yeah.
the story a disservice.
Yeah. Yeah.
So looking for what are the moments, the pivotal moments that I'm going to write about that really tie this together? Not
Yeah.
an easy task. How
Well,
long
it
did the
was,
book
yeah.
take? Yeah.
It came pretty quick when establishing what's your voice, what's your, and I read a lot of autobiographies. Uh, Kick Me by Paul Feig is a good one. Gene Wilder's autobiography was really kind of fun. I read David Sedaris, who sort of writes a lot about his life, and in kind of a whimsical, humorous, sardonic, I don't know what the word is, but sort of not taking himself too seriously. And I went, okay, it's kind of maybe like where I would go if I can. And you hear that voice in your head that starts talking to you, and you go, how would I, if I were to tell somebody this story about Elvis, how would I write that? Well, I'm just going to write it exactly like I told you. And, and then you read it and go, well, I can edit this and make it a little better. So, that was because I'd written some scripts and things like that, but writing, in a certain kind of nonfiction or fiction is a whole other ballgame. So that
Oh,
was,
I think a book is very daunting, right? Because it's so different
yeah,
than script writing. I think writing a book, you need, because there's nothing visual, right? You can rely upon the visual a lot with the script, but
right,
with a book, there's nothing. I mean, you've got to create the picture by your
exactly.
words.
Yeah, because
Um,
dialogue, it's all dialogue heavy, when you're writing a script, and when you're writing an experience and you're fleshing it out, and you go, where do you start? Where do you start a book even? I don't want to go, well, I was born in Hollywood and blah, 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 And in my book, I start at an autograph show. And it was like, I think, I thought, okay, this is kind of interesting. And I said, because there's a lot of moments when you do those shows. I don't do them much anymore just because of COVID and all that kind of stuff. But sometimes you're sitting there for 10, 20, half hour, nobody's coming up to your table, and you just start looking around, you get your thoughts, and you start reflecting back on your life. I thought, okay, well, that's true. I do that, when I'm sitting there waiting for somebody to come up and talk to me. And but then, you start looking around and you go, gosh, this guy's life over here, he really didn't do much, why? He was a big star over here, and then, looking over that way, and I go, wow, there's Richard Dreyfuss. Yeah, huge star, one Academy Award winning guy, and he's here, like I am. And I go, how did I get here? What brought me to this place? What made this guy over here, an Academy Award winning actor, and this guy over here, he's now a prison guard over in Florida. That's weird, but he's still who he was, and that was sort of the kickoff to looking back on your life from that point of view. That you're going, wow, this is a weird place I'm at, and let me look back and see if I can and make some sense of it. That anyway, that's the start of the book. But again, you're right. You got to pick and choose. You can't just go on and on about stuff. So I think I did it pretty well. I think it's a pretty fun read.
So before I let you go, I know we're running out of time, but is there something in particular you're working on now?
Well, yes, I've been actually pretty busy in the last few months. This will probably be too late, but there's an episode of The Connors show that's going to air on the 16th of November, so of this year. That's coming up like tomorrow. But I did a couple other shows, one called Mrs. Davis, that's Peacock. And then I did another one with Brie Larson, who's, Academy Award winning actress. I don't know if they've settled on a title. I know the book that it's from is called Lessons in Chemistry, but they keep calling it 6:30. I don't know why, but whatever. And then I did a nice little indie film. Yeah, so that's out there too, but I don't know if they're going to have a name for that yet as well. So, but anyway, those three, Mrs. Davis, Lessons in Chemistry, yeah, and the Connors, they're all kind of in the hopper, waiting to come out.
Cool. Connors, another cool show, cool set.
Oh man, I was so over the moon to kind of work with John Goodman. I mean, actually, I worked with Sarah Gilbert in the scene that I had. But just to meet John Goodman, who I just think is such a great actor and such a sweet guy. I kind of went all fanboy on him and had to get a selfie with him. And yeah, so great. Estelle Parsons, actually another great actress, is making a return to the show tomorrow. And everybody on that show, Laurie Metcalf, it's just a real all-star cast. So it was really fun.
Can you tell us anything about your character, or no, until it's released?
I just watch. They get
Yeah.
upset when they start revealing things. I don't know. I can tell you a minute,
Okay.
but I can't. Yeah, just you got to watch it.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Last question. Christmas is coming up. Do you have a special tradition that's important to you, or any Christmas story that you could share that was either funny or heartwarming for you?
Um. Well, a Christmas tradition. I don't think we have any Christmas traditions. I mean, we just celebrate Christmas, and it's always kind of a big thing in my wife's family. They love to like just go way over the over the board with giving tons and tons of presents, mainly because they came from such impoverished background. It's sweet that that they've done very well as in their lives. So they're really happy to want to share some of that. But now, I just like being with the kids. My kids are not, they're adults now, but that's to me what it's all about. It's just all about family and getting together and celebrating your love for each other. And that's what we'll be doing.
Excellent. Thank you so much for joining me. And I hope that you'll come back as you're doing more projects and talk to me about it.
All right. Sounds good.
Thank you so much for your time. And I'm going to say goodbye from the podcast.
All right. Thanks, Toni.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.